day.
Got
There he
it.
is.
John.
I had no idea what I was doing.
What's up, dude?
Say hi. Look at his hat, John.
I know, I'm wearing your hat. Thank you, guys.
Consider nothing. Can you read it? Can you see that? What does it say? Impossible. Consider nothing impossible. Yeah.
Oh,
Wrong. Let's
that's
build your muscles.
so awesome.
There he is.
How are you guys doing?
Alrighty. So, hi everybody.
John, tell him hey.
It's louder. They kind of
Hi,
hear.
you.
What's up?
Yeah, what's up?
What's
Yeah.
up?
What's up?
Hey, Laura, tell them what you did today. What'd you guys do?
Okay, what did we do today? You don't know. So what did we do today? Today was a little bit of a slower day for us, but you had music therapy. Yeah, he sang for his first time with music therapy. And we did the infrared sauna. We got in there and sweated, didn't you? You don't know. And let's see, what else have we done? Watched some golf. Did some writing. Anything else? I don't know. How was your day?
It was good. It was good. I had a really good day. Saw lots of really cool cases, and I'm excited to, for us to help some of these people out that are trying to look for answers.
Absolutely. And those that don't know, I just loaded a website with all the links to everything that we have used, and I'll continue to add to that. But I have no affiliation with any of the things. It's not for anything but to help share the word and to help people understand and have guidance and get some hope for moving forward if they're dealt with any kind of injury of any sorts.
Yeah, I think people just need to know that we put together this link just because a lot of people are asking for help, and the whole thing is just trying to create a great resource page because a lot of people have brain injuries or they have kids with developmental issues and really no one knows where to go.
Right.
So Laura and I just got together and we just put together everything from what kind of labs people should use to different doctors that are out there to what kind of books. There's also an online course with Dr. Malilo that we talk about. So the whole thing is just a great resource page that you guys can go to, because one of the things is, Laura and I both get inundated with so many different messages, and it's not that people are being rude, trying to respond back. It's just we decided we were just going to put together just one great page that has all this stuff, in one page that you can learn about. So, all right, John. So let's tell them how we were able to help you out. So the first thing.
You don't know everything. Everybody just know the answer to everything right now is I don't know, which is, hey, I'd rather it be something, right? Right, John? I don't know.
All right. So I want to tell you a really cool story. So Laura and I and John, we got a chance to meet, and I have to give credit to this. So Corey Gritter, who is a really good friend of mine, Corey Gritter was a Marine. He was a scout sniper who got injured in Afghanistan, and he reached out to me. One night, it was like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. I was laying in my a hotel bed in Dubai. Dr. Brandon Crawford and I were doing a research project with kids with autism. And he says, hey, man, there's this Navy SEAL that had a brain injury, and I want you to help him out. And so he tells me his name's John Grant. And so I was like, I wasn't familiar who he was. And then he tells me, he says, oh, he was in a coma and he woke up, and he's like, he's got this wife. She's a Pilates instructor. He's like, well, look, I want you to go meet these people. So, I travel over the world all the time, and we found a schedule that worked great. And we linked up, and so I flew over there, and the main goal is for me just to be able to go and give Laura some suggestions on what to do. So he picks me up from the airport, and we're driving to their house, and he tells me, he says, he's like, man, I hope we can find some good stuff. And I'm like, yeah, man, well, he hasn't done any of these types of treatments. I'm pretty sure he hasn't. So as he says this, right above him, a shooting star like flies out of the sky. And he's real quiet. He looks at me and he goes, did you see that shooting star? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, and I tell him, I'm like, man, that means some really good stuff's going to happen. And so that was really cool because that kind of set the platform for our interaction and working together. So Laura, I guess just kind of maybe explain like how John was before we got a chance to start working together.
Right. Oh my gosh. It's night or day, right? I just can remember that night that you were coming because what was happening that night was, I think I was texting you. I was like, I hope that John's going to be dressed that you could even come in the front door, because at that time he was so agitated. He was spitting. He had thrown all of his clothes off. John doesn't remember any of this. That typically people going through brain injury and as they're emerging, they're not going to remember these different stages. But John giggles now when he thinks about it. But he was just like, he was off the wall. I didn't know if I was going to be able to let you in my front door.
Yeah.
He was butt naked in his bed with everything thrown everywhere. Do you remember that? You don't remember. But anyways, before we got connected, you and I, it was just like I was asking all these questions to everyone and I was just not getting answers. I knew from my background with Pilates and gyrotonic, I knew that the body can heal. I knew that movement was key, but John, being a Navy SEAL and being somebody that just like he was strong-willed before and stubborn, I knew that if he was given the right tools, he would heal. And at that time, I just knew that he was just like almost just angry and frustrated inside, and everything was just like misfiring. I always like to say like his episodes he had were like seizures, but they weren't really seizures because, you know, but they were similar to that, these outbursts and these crazy anger. And I mean, they were every single day, a couple times a day. And before you came, I mean, he was in bed probably 90% of the day. He got up, maybe had a meal and went right back to bed. He did not want to be even up in his chair. It was even unsafe. So when you came, it was like for the first time, I saw a joy in John. He knew that somebody was coming to help him. So we were just not getting any answers. I mean, we were just going, you know, hitting a brick wall every time I asked a doctor. I'm like, how about if he's not metabolizing his medicines right? Or how about if, you know, this medicine's making things worse? Or how about if his diet, or, you know, he's on thickened liquids. How about if that thickened liquid's messing with him? Or, you know, all these questions I just kept asking. And they're like, well, he has a brain injury. It's going to be how it is. It was always like, there was no guidance for it. So when you came, you just loaded me with all the information. You answered all my questions. And when you left, I was like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And we just started going full force in and just, you know, starting from the beginning and, you know, cleaning up everything. I just felt like it was, you know, looking back, do I wish I had you on board from the ICU? Absolutely. But I think we went through that whole journey to actually help those that they don't have to go through that 2 years of agitation and frustration, that there are answers that you can get early on.
Yeah. So let's do this. One of the big things when we first started, the first thing I talked to you guys was about diet.
Yeah.
Could you share some of the stuff? I know that you guys were gluten-free before we met, but could you share some of the stuff about, like, I remember there's a blueberry story about this.
Yeah. So when we, you know, and even when he was at the rehab facilities, I mean, there was nutritionists on board and nothing against them, but the focus, like even when he was in ICU, I said, what is the tube feeding he's getting? And they were like, this is just what everybody generically gets. And I said, you know, it's very important what's going in his body. And I wish I advocated more at that point, now knowing like there's Kate Farms and all these different great organic foods. So, you know, most of the tube feeding is corn-based or corn syrup and, you know, everything that's going to cause more inflammation in the brain. So, and then when we were at the rehab facilities, when he started eating, it was like I was asking them, you know, what's going to support his brain? And they're just like, you know, anything's fine, whatever. But I had done my own research and I found like blueberries for antioxidants. I knew that coconut oil. I knew like all these different things I was trying to give him, and I was going gluten-free. But when Kyle came, John was so inflamed. You know, we ran the food sensitivity, and to find out everything I was feeding him, he was sensitive to. So when he was going to the bathroom, blueberries were in his poop. Excuse me, everybody. But we found out like he could not break down blueberries.
Yeah, and that's something that people don't realize. That so the one thing following brain injuries, and again, every person's different, but number one thing is to try and look at doing a food sensitivity panel. And a lot of times you'll see your doctors, and even me too. You know, I'll tell patients, hey, look, you know, you might want to go ahead and do a food sensitivity before you come and see me, so we can make sure that we find which kind of foods you should and shouldn't eat. And what a food sensitivity panel does is it looks at how your body responds to a certain food. So there's like 96 food panels, there's 100 food panels, there's 150, 300, 500 foods. And what you really want to do is you want to make sure, so one, if you have a brain injury, means your brain's it's stressed out, it's inflamed. Okay. And so what you feed, anything hits your gut is going to impact your brain. I mean, if you have a headache, you take an aspirin, Tylenol, Excedrin, or whatever, Emitrex, and what happens is your headache goes away. But there's a component to where your dietary, anything that you eat can have an impact on your brain. So in John's case, if he's sensitive to, let's say, corn, and he's eating corn in his tube feed whenever he was in the hospital, then he's going to create inflammation. And if you're trying to recover, the brain's not necessarily going to recover to the extent it should if you're consistently kind of, putting gas on the fire. So we did a food sensitivity panel, and so John wasn't digesting blueberries, and then it showed up actually in his food sensitivity that he was sensitive to blueberries. So then what we do is we remove the stressors, we remove foods that are actually creating inflammation. And then if we do that on a consistent basis, what's going to happen is you're going to take a great deal of inflammation off. And when you're looking at recovering from a brain injury, you want to make sure that you're not creating any additional stress on the brain. And that could be from dietary. So people really need to look at diet. And again, in hospitals, it's a little different because, they're giving you certain meals, but that's something for me is just, clinically, I think that people need to really look at what they eat. And I've had patients to where they've recovered quite a bit, and they eat like a bunch of ice cream, a bunch of sugar, and then, see their spasticity get really bad, or they might have a hand contracture come back. And they don't know why it happens. And, if you think about if you break your wrist or you break an ankle, and what happens to the muscles around that joint is they tighten up. Well, when the brain's under stress, it's a lot of times muscles are going to tighten up. And so when you look at a lot of patients, they have this kind of flex posture, and certain parts of the brain can get damaged. Well, when you start improving the function of that brain, you might see that their muscles start to relax. And food could be a huge, huge therapeutic kind of target. And I know, Laura, you guys know this stuff because, John dropped weight. People, comment all the time about how his facial tone got better. And the whole stuff is just, we got to try to make sure that we start eating cleaner foods that someone's not sensitive to.
But, even when this is the part that's interesting is, I was giving him everything that, any diet or like what the industry says is healthy and good, right? I was giving him chicken, I was giving him greens, and I was giving him, but the point I think people really need to know is that everybody is different. And especially with the brain injury, your body's chemically switched up. Something that might have worked before might not work now. So, he was not getting, I was doing all fresh food and I was doing everything that I thought I was doing right, but we really didn't know what was going on inside. And to find out, like, I was giving him chicken, he was allergic to chicken. He was allergic to, the blueberries, and he was allergic to, just like things that I was giving him almost every single day that we all consume. Who eats chicken? A lot of us eat chicken. But that was like way up on his inflammation chart.
Yeah. And that's stuff that people just don't realize. And again, our own diet stuff too, is I always tell people to try to eat, organic when you can. And I get a lot of comments, well, it's really expensive. It's like, yeah, but you're getting better quality. And then just trying to eat real food. I think what happens too much is people don't detoxify like they should, because one, we don't have enough nutrients. But John, smile for me, man.
Look how beautiful that smile is.
Oh, I love you guys. But no, and then stuff too. Now you guys take your tongue out. There you go. So mirror neurons are really cool. And that's something that you also when people have brain injuries, trying to make people mimic, whether it's facial reactions, stuff like that. But yeah, go back to diet. Organic, is something that I highly recommend. And then just really stick into more, like I've seen some people talking about ketogenic diets are great. Paleo diets are good. Grain-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free. Really just do a food sensitivity panel, in my opinion. Find out which foods you can and can't eat. And then the next step is something that we ran was an organic acid panel. It's a urine sample. Again, try to look at someone's nutritional status. Make sure that they can break down carbs. They can break down proteins. They can break down fats. The brain's composed of mostly fat. So if you have a hard time breaking fats down, well, how are we going to go ahead and get good, healthy fats in the body? And then there's stuff called methylation, which is how nerves fire. B vitamin status, which is going to be like how your nerves function, your energy. Then you get into looking at like oxidative stress, which is how your liver functions. Like, are you inflamed? Can you get rid of toxins? Do you have any type of gut bacteria issue? And a lot of times following patients coming out of hospitals, they could have had an infection. So they put on a bunch of a bunch of antibiotics, but to take a probiotic while they're on that. And if you have issues breaking down carbs can turn into sugar. Sugar feeds bacteria. And there's research, and I'm going to get later on talking about how there's a gut-brain connection. So the gut's super, super healthy. So, yeah, I think one of the first steps of recovering is really looking at diet and also looking at nutrient deficiencies. Absolutely.
Especially the medications, looking back, I mean, I again, it's not anything like, oh, I wish we did it differently, but it's more just telling people, even with the medications, I think back when John was doing really good at the beginning, when he started emerging, and then all of a sudden we hit a downward spiral. And what I think really happened is medications were added, thinking that the medication was going to heal the brain injury. And as we know, no medication can change what's in the brain. We got to give it the right stimulation, which we'll talk about. But when we start taking all those medications off is when we started getting better again, right? So it's on some level, if people think of this is what you're putting in your body, especially after a brain injury, everything is important, even from medications to food, anything that's going internally.
Absolutely.
Even on externally, which we can get to the environment, which we have a link on that page on my website, because just the environment, which you're surrounded with, all of it matters. But anyways,
so
a lot of stuff.
Yep, soapbox. Hey, so some of the questions here. So one of the questions that we had was, it was said right here, it says, onset of a TBI, what's the most important thing looking back now with the knowledge that you know now? So Laura, what would you say would be probably one of the most important things looking back from John's recovery? Like, what would you have wished that could have happened? What would you say that, if someone says, hey, my husband or daughter had a traumatic brain injury, like, right, what's the number one plan of action? What should I do?
First off, I wish I had you there. Number two is the primitive reflexes, understanding that in the development of the brain from, the different levels, just like a child. I mean, the brain is rebooting just like a newborn. So understanding those different levels, I think merging consciousness is a very interesting process, but it's an important process. Again, not medicating too much during that process to allow the brain to develop and allow the brain to go through the different phases, just like a child. It's important that they hit each milestone, and same with a brain injury. You want to hit those milestones to, get back to how your brain was. I think that would be number one. Diet, again, if I could go back, I would make sure that he was on the organic tube feeding. I think that would be really important, for the inflammation within his brain. I also think, doing the nutrition analysis earlier on, so I wouldn't have been feeding them chicken and blueberries forever. I think that would have helped with his gut a little bit sooner, because, again, until we met you, that was like a year and a half into it. He was getting what I thought was the right foods for him. I was actually making all this food, even when he was on pureed, because he was, pureed food. I was making it and taking it into the hospital to him, because the food at the hospital was just, we didn't even know what it was that was sitting there. So, and a lot of times what I found is a lot of sugary drinks they wanted to give him, for his electrolytes and stuff. So I was really, adamant about not giving him those. But I think the nutrition part, infections, it's very common after a brain injury. You're going to have, if you have a trach, you're exposed to so much in the hospital. I think that getting more knowledge and understanding of what was going on, rather than just antibiotic after antibiotic after antibiotic, more of doing those different tests on a deeper level, and knowing if he had mold, because as we know, he has this toxic mold. Did he get that in the military? Maybe. Then how if we knew that earlier on, we could have been treating that, and instead of having UTI after UTI after UTI, right? We know that it links to the mold. So I think, doing that would be really good. And then also just having somebody do a good neuro evaluation on a level, but on a level of educating the caregiver as well. So like, what are we trying to see and see the different steps of what needs to be happening? Because again, it is a developmental, God created a way for the brain to heal, and you have to go through all the different phases. And, you know, when you miss something, or, you know, I mean, like recently with his gait and his walking, we're finding that his left arm is pulling him more, you know, so now we're stimulating the left arm. I mean, like every little detail is so important. So really understanding, rather than just trying to get somebody up to walk or just trying to get somebody to talk, really healing the brain and understanding where the damage is and kind of connecting everything together.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, from my perspective, a big thing is looking at patients and saying, all right, like, you know, and again, I do this a lot on Instagram, is I'm huge on primitive reflexes, thanks to my mentor, Dr. Robert Malillo. But people need to realize that, you know, when you have a brain injury, you can get what's called a frontal release, where a lot of the primitive reflexes that babies have, they start to resurface following a brain injury. Because actually the frontal lobe, what it does, it actually can inhibit whenever primitive reflexes are being integrated. The frontal lobe will actually go through and inhibit, you know, the brainstem. So what I mean by that is, for example, like John, a lot of people have commented about his facial tone. And said how, wow, his face looks so much better. I mean, look at that smile. And it's beautiful. And what happens is when you go and do like a rooting reflex, so if you come from like the chin here and you come down, and what happens, you might see the lips start to kind of twitch. And you posted a video, Laura, of this, or you can go from the nose, come down, and you'll see the lips start to twitch. What's happening is that's a retained primitive reflex. So again, for parents out there that are watching who have kids, and your kid had an issue with like latching on during breastfeeding, a lot of times they don't actually have this reflex. And then, you know, if this reflex is retained in young pediatrics, a lot of these kids could have issues with swallowing. They could be picky eaters. They could have issues with, you know, their tongue, their speech difficulties. And then you have like the palmar grasp, where you look at the hand and you stroke down the hand and the hand actually curls up, okay, and moves. Yes.
See how John's, when I rub it and how it goes, that's his, you know, we still have working on that one. But then on his right hand, you know, nothing.
Yes. And again, so what we want to do is we want to see the hands, when it does it, we don't want to see any type of movement or flickering of the hand. And I get a lot of kids and even adults. I've seen this in kids who have dyslexia, or adults who have dyslexia, or kids who have speech disorders. And so like one of the things we're working on, John, is, you know, trying to get his speech better. So when we work on getting rid of this palmar grasp, again, it can help that out. So think about a baby. First of all, a baby might go ahead and they start grabbing things with their hand, and where do they go? They put it to their mouth.
Right.
Okay. So if you still have this palmar reflex and you still have this rooting, good chance that your kid or even an adult might have an issue with speech, or they might have like apraxia, where they're having fine motor difficulties. So again, we want to get rid of all these primitive reflexes. Another thing I love looking at is called the asymmetric tonic neck reflex. You get on your hands and your knees, you turn their head to the left, turn their head to the right, and you see if the elbow bends. And if the elbow bends, that reflex is retained.
He did it to me when he was here.
Well, you see this, it's common. So like, this is the thing, ADHD, you know, a lot of us have that. I mean, I was diagnosed, I was on amphetamines for 18 years. And no one ever checked me for primitive reflexes. And I was 24 years old whenever someone, you know, I was actually you know, Dr. Malillo came into my life, and I started talking about primitive reflexes, and I had this stuff, and, you know, I was battling anxiety issues and all this stuff, and I get rid of primitive reflexes, and it's like my whole world got changed.
Right.
It's
a simple thing I think people need to know, like with John, with the primitive reflexes, I mean, I just make it a habit before I get him out of bed every day. We just go through them. So it's not like something, you know, I think what might be for some people is like, okay, now where am I going to add this in? When am I going to do this? You know, just like find one place in your routine every day. It doesn't take but 5 minutes, you know, and just stroke those areas and just try to stimulate them, right?
Yeah, and it even happens too. So like even patients who are in comas, I don't know if you've ever seen, you know, I've seen quite a few coma patients, and, you know, I've been fortunate to go to the hospitals and talk with families and stuff, and they're asking like, what can I do? And what you do is you know, in the hospital, they actually go and do what's called the Vinsky sound. They go up to the bottom of the foot and they stroke it. And that's one of the signs that say, oh, well, you still have an upper motor neuron lesion. Well, what you do is you got to get rid of this reflex. And so in order for someone to be able to walk properly, that Babinski needs to go away. So I'm a huge fan, like getting rid of the rooting reflex, getting rid of the palmar reflex, getting rid of the Babinski on the foot. And you have a lot of sensory receptors on your hands, the bottom of your feet, and then your mouth, and then your spine. So just doing light little brisk stimulation on that. And again, you can take like a vibration toothbrush, flip it over to the back side and start vibrating the hands or vibrating the face. Vibrating a little bit of the tongue, and all that vibration is sending sensory input, meaning that the brain, it develops off of sensory input. So think about a baby. A baby learns how to walk and crawl and all that stuff because of movement. And babies that aren't exposed to, people that love them and hug them and stuff like that, these kids typically have behavior problems. And we're going to go talk about the left and the right side of the brain here in a little bit, but you want to stimulate these primitive reflexes. And you want to get rid of it, because the more that you stimulate them, what's going to happen is the frontal lobe's going to start to go down and inhibit, and that's how you get rid of these frontal release signs or primitive reflexes. I want to talk about one more thing too. This is really interesting too. Vagal nerve stimulation or vagal nerve exercises. So immediately following a TBI, you're going to start to see that people start having gastrointestinal issues. Okay. And I mean like this, you could have constipation, meaning that you're backed up. You could have irritable bowel syndrome where everything you eat runs straight through you. And what you want to do is you really should be able to eat and go to the bathroom. You should go at least daily, if not twice a day. And when you look at brain injury patients, a lot of times they get backed up for sometimes 2-3 days, or they're taking stool softeners, and you look at their abdomen, it gets super distended, meaning that it gets really hard. Okay. And you palpate their stomach and it literally is like really hard. Well, the purpose of going to the bathroom is you're getting rid of toxins, you're getting rid of all this stuff. And if the stuff stays in your body, it can create kind of a vicious cycle of inflammation, and you got to get rid of this stuff. And what's interesting is the vagus nerve, which innervates your intestines, it actually comes from the brainstem. And so what you see with the brainstem is you start seeing where primitive reflexes are present, or you get what's called frontal release signs. So it's really cool, but when you start getting rid of a lot of these reflexes, a lot of people's digestive system can improve. Absolutely. So talk about some of the vagal nerve exercises that we recommended with John.
Ooh, what do we do, babe? Well, we do all sorts of, we do the laser, which is wonderful. Yeah, we have the laser that we do, vibrating the tongue, right? Humming.
Yes.
So when we're in the car, and I think we talked about this, with the primitive reflexes, doing them first thing in the morning. It's always just finding a way to do it within everything else. It's like John and I, our daily routine, we don't just like go, okay, we're going to spend 2 hours and do rehab. Rehab is like just all day. We just kind of incorporate it. So like we're in the car driving to an appointment, we'll play a song and we'll hum it. So humming has been really good. Gargling, we do some gargling. That's recently has been able to do. Let's see. Also trying to get him so he can gag, right? Gag reflex. What else have we done?
Well, another thing you can ask him too. So there's stuff called straw breathing, and we recently had, and again, we have this. We have a lot of the stuff we did with John on a thing called Brain Chat, which is an academic thing that two other doctors and I, Dr. Brandon Brock, Dr. Brandon Crawford, and Ryan Cedermark and I put together. And we just talk about, different ways on how to recover from a brain injury. But there's this one thing that we do is called straw breathing, which is where you take a straw, put it in your mouth, and you breathe in through your nose, and then you breathe out through your mouth, through the straw. And doing that 2-3 minutes a day is great. So it's called straw breathing. Absolutely love that. John, you look good, man.
John, say what's up? What's up? Go. And we were talking about the facial tone and stuff with him, and just the whole stimulating the face. A lot of times, again, another exercise I do with him all the time is he just mimics what I do, like we were talking about the mirror neurons, and we just kind of do things all the time, like go. He can do something I can't do. I can't do that.
Oh, John, that's awesome.
What is that, Kyle?
Huh?
I can't do that.
Man, you got all kind of cranial nerves working now.
I know. I'm cray-cray, aren't I? In the membrane. I don't know. Recently, I've been asking him, like, yes or no, do you like dinner when I make him dinner? You know what I say, go yes or no or okay. You know what he's been doing? Okay.
The
I
coolest
was
thing,
not saying okay.
the coolest thing though with you guys was going to eat sushi and watching John
Oh my
brush chopsticks.
Now,
Huh?
what is your favorite food? What is your favorite food? Tell him.
Pizza. I heard that. Pizza.
I'm like, that's not on the diet, but we make it happen.
Hey,
Don't worry,
cauliflower
everybody.
pizza.
I do get him pizza. What?
Cauliflower pizza. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what else do you like? What else do you like to eat?
Sugar ice cream.
Tell him he can't hear you. Sushi. You love some sushi.
Yeah, you killed it with chopsticks, man.
Yeah. That was amazing to watch, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was.
You know, the coolest thing that's going on with him right now is oh, sorry, everybody, that's my dog. Kai, come here. Kai, come here. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm sorry. These are doorbells. I have no idea.
John, you look great, man. You look great, man.
I'm looking for Daddy. Is his ability to do things like, what is that? Not intuition. What's that word? I can't think of it. Initiation. So I'll go upstairs, let's say, to change the watch. I'll come downstairs. He rolls around, finds his iPad, turns his iPad on, puts in the security code, and finds the game he wants to play.
Is that left brain working,
listening, like, that sounds crazy, but there was none of that. Like, none of that. That's, like, huge for him.
All right, well, let's do this. So, question we're asking about calming down the brain, and I guess people wanted to know about the right and left side of the brain. So let's go over this. And so again, this stuff comes from, this is a book. It's called Disconnected Kids by my mentor, Dr. Robert Melillo, and he's been a great help with us in John's case.
Yeah.
So inside of this thing, he talks about this, and so he says high left side symptoms. So he has obsessive, compulsive, impulsive, tics, vocal tics, outburst, hyperimmune system, meaning that a lot of patients who typically have like autoimmune diseases, meaning their immune system starts attacking itself because their immune system gets like really ramped up. More environmental allergies, more food sensitivities, increased blood pressure, can't sleep, anxious all the time. So I'm a left brain person. Laura's a left brain person. And so what happens though is you start seeing though that if the left side of the brain gets overactive, these are some of the symptoms that you can see. And then you have the low right symptoms, meaning the right side of the brain's decrease, and so doesn't read facial expressions well. So again, so many people, parents who are out there who have maybe like a son who's got some sort of sensory disorder or sensory processing disorder, and you might think that, you might smile and they don't smile back, or you might, notice that these kids don't recognize emotions. Typically, that's a right side of the brain that's actually underdeveloped or understimulated or underintegrated. So you can do like a right brain exercise. We can talk about that. Poor balance, poor posture, lacks motivation, poor gross motor skills. You'll see the head can actually tilt to the right. Eye tracking is very, very huge. So eye movements, predominantly, there's what's called a frontal eye field, meaning the right side of the brain does a lot of volitional control of the eye movements. And so when you look at brain injury patients, a lot of times you want to see if they can actually like track. Like, first of all, you're checking your pupils. Is one pupil bigger than the other? Can you track? Can you go vertical? Can you converge? And I see that a lot of times too, is that patients can't actually converge, meaning that you literally have them try to bring their eyes in.
I couldn't.
What happens is one eye stays straight and the one eye deviates. And I find this a lot. So we've seen comments about occipital neuralgia, meaning that you have this referred pain from the back of your neck that can go up into your head. It's called occipital neuralgia. And what I find is patients who have occipital neuralgia, meaning that their eyes, they don't typically converge very well. You'll see that they could actually have like a little head tilt and can get migraines. Or I have a lot of patients who've had numerous migraines and they've had Botox injections and all these other, crazy meds. and they still have migraines, still have headaches, and then you start doing like convergence and they can't converge. So you can actually do what's called pencil push-ups to try and correct that. And so you see that very, 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 very common in brain injuries, because the nerves from the eye, they actually go all the way back down to the brain stem, which is where the primitive reflexes and stuff are. So also too, that's where the nerve to the facial muscle comes in. So the facial nerve that innervates your face. So when you see a brain injury, a lot of times you'll see that typically can have like abnormal posture. Their eyes are off. They have low facial tone. They don't swallow very well, and they have poor digestion. And that's all from this brainstem injury. So yeah, and even picky eaters. Picky eaters are a right brain deficiency. So go ahead.
We forgot to kind of talk about at the beginning. I think a lot of people want to know actually like what John's injury was, and I think in the simplest terms, he had brain sharing through his whole brain and even into his brain stem, which is very, very like traumatic, like severe. Not a lot of people make it out from that, but I think, people want to know where his injury was. It was throughout the brain. So we really need to heal the whole brain. But because he was so left dominant before being a Navy SEAL, and, this is what I learned with you, that was already driven in him. Yes, he was damaged on both sides and his speech was really damaged, but that personality of who he was before, we really need to stimulate his right side to bring that agitation down.
Correct. And that's something people don't realize this stuff. And so who trains me, and, I work with him quite a bit.
We're losing him.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So what you see though is you have to look before the accident, meaning that did you have any type of like cold sore? Did you have strep? Did you have mono?
We're losing you again.
Oh, can you hear me?
You're cutting in and out.
I got full access here. Are you good? Are we good now? No? Yes?
Kyle, you're coming in and out. We barely hear you.
Okay.
So I think you need to re-say that.
My internet, am I good? Can you hear me?
You're good now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm getting all excited now. I'm getting amped up. This is my jam.
I have no idea when you're around. He's like throwing everything from everywhere. That's the cool thing. His passion is just outstanding. All right.
Yeah. So what you see, you have to look. Okay. So a lot of times people fall in neglect that. Yeah, we're so concerned about the damage currently, what's going on, but what happened previous to the injury? Meaning, like, did you have any type of mono? Did you have Epstein-Barr? Did you have cold sore? Did you have strep or staph? Some of these things, these current infections, what happens is they can lay dormant in the body, and then all of a sudden you have this brain injury, your immune system gets suppressed, and then these things start surfacing, and it's kind of like a silent epidemic. It's a silent killer. No one knows. And then the next thing is okay, did you have any type of what's called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences? How was your environment like, were you abused as a kid? Were you picked on as a kid? Did you walk late? Did you talk late? Did you crawl late? Did you have a lot of inner ear infections? Did you have a lot of surgeries? Were you a lot of antibiotics? All these things actually matter because that's part of the development of the brain. Okay. And then it's like this. How were you in school? Were there certain subjects that you excelled in? Were there certain subjects that you didn't do well in? Do you have any primitive reflexes that were previous before that or after? And when you have a brain injury, it's like this. Let's go back. Let's look at everything from a developmental approach. Do you have primitive reflexes? You need to go through each individual one. You can't neglect not even one single one of them.
Right.
Do you have any type of issues with your core? And again, if you want to get someone to walk, you got to build your core up first. A lot of times people just start trying to get people to walk.
Right.
And again, you need to go through and do like crawling. You have to literally put the brain back into this developmental stage and you test it through that. How's the eyes? Are the eyes symmetrical? Is one pupil bigger than the other? Is there any deviation in the eyes? Can the eyes go up and down and left and right and track? Is there any posture issues? Open the mouth up, look at the palate and see if there's any type of palatal paresis, meaning that the little uvula is one side's higher than the other.
Right.
Yeah, and then again, it's like this. Is there nutritional deficiencies, any food sensitivities? You can't just say, hey, you had a brain injury. I'm going to just hook you up to all this stuff and start pumping you with a bunch of, whatever. You need to know exactly like, hey, what's going on here? And again, people, in my opinion, looking at brain injuries fail to neglect what happened in the past. And again, developmental, adverse childhood experiences, all this stuff matters because now it has an impact. Like, for example, like John, you get this guy who's Navy SEAL, he's a badass dude, and then all of a sudden you have this injury, and then what happens is you get this guy, that's what I like to see. You get this guy who's, he's used to being active, running, working out, and then he's not working out anymore. So what's going to happen? If his right side of his brain, which is like the brake pedal, can actually calm down. Okay, so the right side of the brain has a higher concentration of a chemical called GABA. GABA actually calms and slows things down. So then what happens is you get easily ticked off. Well, what happens is can you pull the brake? No, because the brake's not fully integrated. He couldn't. But then what we did is we knew that after looking at stuff and said, all right, well, all we got to do is stimulate the right side of the brain. And how do we do it? Let's look at, you can do vision therapy. You can do certain colors. You can put color lenses on. Blue, indigo, violet, activate the right side of the brain. You can listen to music in the left side of the ear. You can do like whole tones. You can do like melodic music. You can do sensory input like vibration therapy.
On our website now that we created, you guys, that he's listing off. I know it's a lot of things, but they're there. Because like he talks fast, I know. Keep going.
No, I'm sorry. And I have a little Cajun accent too, so people sometimes will not better understand me.
Yeah, but really, like saying, we really, when you came in, I mean, the biggest thing is that nutrition was important. We had to figure out what was going on internally. But then we also, a lot of people ask or say that, after a brain injury, the agitation, John really had agitation. When I say he had agitation, some people ask me, like, really, what was the agitation like? And you think of the worst, it was the worst. I mean, I got bit a couple times. I mean, there was things. I mean, people ask me, how did you ever take him home? And, that was all God. He gave me peace. But John went back to, like, what is the instincts of your body? Like, we are all, like, you bite to protect yourself, right? Or you spit. Like, I remember you telling me, I was like, why is he spitting? And what did you say? It's like just a part of the development, really. Like, remember he just sat there? It was really cool when Dr. Daigle came to see us. I went upstairs to do something. He sat there and just, like, observed John. It was amazing. And John started spitting, and then he started, like, throwing the cup, and Dr. Daigle's like, whatever, like, you were just observing him. I was like, that is so cool, because most people are like, don't do that, but you understood that that's like, and that's the thing, a lot of these behaviors are not them, and they're not going to stay there if they're stimulated correctly. What we're being fed over and over is like, he's always going to be agitated, you're just going to have to learn how to cope with it. Well, guess what, after we've done all this work, he's not agitated ever. I mean, like, it's not a coping thing anymore. It's just he's back to, we broke through the stages, or that his right brain was not, firing.
Yeah, and something, so a lot of times people, especially if maybe a doctor's on here or someone's like saying, all right, well, first of all, like, I've never heard of this information, or where's this stuff coming from? This stuff's all the literature, and it's all in the research. You can find all this stuff. You can find a lot in psychology. It's about how are you able to integrate the stuff. And so, there's stuff out there. So if you have a loved one who has like a brain injury, you can do what's called a DTI, diffuse tractography imaging, where they literally take images and sees which tract in the brain are working. Or you can do what's called a functional MRI, and you can see which part of the brains are actually like really globally activated or maybe not activated enough. And the whole goal with everything is and someone said, go Tigers. And yeah, I'm an LSU fan. But it's trying to balance the brain out, making sure that the left and the right can communicate and they can integrate. And that's what we see is that most people don't have that. You just have this really high functioning left side of the brain. So like, for example, I see this a lot of times. Someone could be like, they had a stroke, and then they come and see me and they're like, I don't understand. I had this stroke and I can speak. And it's like, yeah, because speech typically is predominantly the left side of the brain. So yours was in the right side of the brain, which is going to control your posture and your gait and all your sensory input. So you're not filling your legs, and it's all about where it's at in the brain.
Right.
So
really
what's really correct, and what's really cool about
the
brain,
I mean, even just normal people watching this with any kind of injury, or, I've known people with back injuries, or even, depression, or any of those different things. Typically it's just a chemical imbalance, or something's not firing correctly. And I think on a bigger level, the more people understand how important the brain is, and how important, like, these tools that you give, they're all, God made them all. It's not like you're throwing pills at somebody, or, it's nothing like that can harm anybody. These are just like everyday activities in this world that we live in today. We want the quick fix, but these are just like, they're lifestyles really that we all need to do.
Yeah, and that's the main stuff. I love what I do because, I don't have to worry about medications and stuff like that, or overdosing people. It's great because I just really kind of just do an evaluation, and it's like I look at like balance and coordination and posture and all this kind of stuff, muscle imbalances, and I work on balancing them out. But it's repetition and it's consistency, and you guys have done great. And this would be an Pilates instructor, but it's all about balance, all about coordination, but it's repetition to be able to build, muscle memory.
Right.
And so let's talk about this, Laura. One of the really cool things too, and again, I've seen some people asking about speech and how to get speech better. And what happens is you got to be very careful. And I see this a lot of times too when I work with little, kids who have autism, and they're nonverbal, and the parents want the kid to speak. Well, what happens is if you have to understand, one is, Dr. Malilo does has an intake form, and what it does is you fill it out and it says, is this a left brain deficiency? Is this a right brain deficiency? And then, so again, I mentioned speech is predominantly the left side of the brain. So let's say that someone has a brain injury or someone has autism. And then what you do is you have to, check primitive reflexes, get rid of primitive reflexes. And then you start working on improving someone's core, you get their balance up. And then it's really neat too, is so if I want to stimulate someone to try to improve their speech, I might actually vibrate their right hand. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the right hand drives the left side of the brain, which is where speech is. Okay. Or what I might do is I might put a metronome in their right ear and might vibrate their hand. And what we're doing is we're using additional sensory input to drive the left side of the brain to help improve someone's speech. Now, again, I'm not a speech therapist whatsoever, but I've seen this stuff that it can actually help out with someone with recovering for speech. And I've seen this in nursing homes that I work with. Or maybe what I might see someone do is someone stands on a vibe plate and they vibrate their right foot, their right hand, listen to music in their right ear, and maybe wear red colored lenses and then try to have them speak. Or might do the same stuff and add maybe like a TENS unit down their neck or down their right side of their spine. And you're using all this sensory input to drive the brain. And so, for me, I tell people all the time, the brain's really cool. It's like this big computer, and you have all these hubs, and then you have all these wires, and it's all, you have these fuses, and you have to make sure that, one, you need to know where the hub is. You need to make sure that the wires are connected and the fuse is on, and you flip the light switch on. And it's all about flipping light switches on. But what you have to do is go from a developmental stage. You have to get rid of primitive reflexes, improve core, make sure people have proper diets, proper nutrition. And then really it's all about, now just repetition. And that, in my opinion, is how you really start recovering from brain injuries. Or even kids would have developmental issues, or if someone had a stroke.
When we were going, we're with John, we're always changing things up and seeing, because as the brain heals, we need to do different things. But, some people that might be listening to this and they're like, oh, there's no way that's vibrating the right hand does this, whatever. But even John, remember we took, with John and his agitation, we knew if we stimulated the left side of his brain, it was just going to wind him up more. So everything we did was the right side of the brain, the coloring, the colors, and John's left side of the body is weaker, so everything we did, like the figure eights on the left side and everything, stimulating the left side to drive the right side. But remember, we tested it one time and we were like, okay, let's vibrate the right hand to see if it helps. And remember, when we did that, we started perseverating even more, right? Because the perseveration. But I think what I'm trying to say
Correct.
Is
and
John, he's like a little model, right? But understand, I think what the bigger picture, because Kyle has a lot of information, is understanding the brain, understanding the right and the left side of the brain. I mean, you can really, even when I was I think there's a place and a time for rehab, and I think physical therapists are great, and we go to the physical therapist every week. She's amazing, steps for recovery. But she's open to all of these different things, because I think if we all work together and kind of accepted it all, I think it's all beneficial. What we were finding with John is, because his brain was not firing correctly, you're asking him to stand, you're asking him to look visually at something, or, you know, at that point he had glasses, so he's seeing the world differently. You know, I think before you ask the body to do something, you need to make sure the brain can handle it, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing, it's a brain injury. So you can't, you know, I see this a lot of times when I get someone who has like a spinal cord injury or their legs paralyzed. And I'm like, all right, first of all, you've been doing rehab for 2 years. And they're like, yes. And I'm like, can you move your foot? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, well, you start doing a little bit higher bit stimulation. Maybe you might put color lenses on, or maybe you might listen to music. You might put tens on a certain point, maybe put tens on like an acupressure point.
Right.
Yeah, you start doing different sensory stimulations to try to override that injury. And what happens, the cool about the brain is sensory inputs can start creating better connections. And that's the whole stuff. It's all about reconnecting. I look at all the stuff just like the book that I recommend is Disconnected. Most people have a brain injury, they're disconnection. They're disconnected. So, you know, again, the gut, you know, there's a research article.
I was just about to say, get back to that. If
yeah,
you don't, and I think that's the piece that people really need to understand. If you can do all of these things, but if you have underlying issues going on, like we did with the mold, or, you know, that certain foods were causing inflammation, I mean, what is going in the body is going to affect it all. Like, you cannot do enough rehab to override, you know, what you eat.
absolutely. Yeah, and again, so just here's a great thing. So Dr. Ryan Cedarmark, he's a business partner of mine. He did his presentation and he pulled his article, and it says here, the gut reaction to traumatic brain injuries. And the quote was, dysfunction of the gastrointestinal tract is a common occurrence in traumatic brain injuries. In the first few weeks after injury, most patients with moderate to severe TBIs have reduced intestinal contractile activity and absorption, which may manifest by vomiting and abdominal distension. And that right there is like a research. If you're a therapist out there, you should call it gut reaction to traumatic brain injuries. It was published in Fly of 2015, but that's huge. And then you look at the stuff right here, and then the next thing right here, it says, the other one was the bidirectional, and again, I'm reading research papers. It says the bidirectional gut-brain microbiota, meaning that's the gut bacteria acts as a potential nexus between the traumatic brain injury, inflammation, and disease. And here's a quote. It says, the proposed mechanism emanating from a damaged gut are closely implicated in the inflammatory process known to promote neuropathology in the brain following a traumatic brain injury, which suggests the gut-brain axis may be, quote, here we go, a therapeutic target to reduce the risk of chronic traumatic encephalopathy and other neurodegenerative disorders following a TBI. That's huge. It's basically saying, like, get the gut healthy. And it's like a number one, like, get the gut healthy.
I think it's so important. You know, it changed us. And it's funny because you know, when people come around, they're like, oh, he can have a little bit of this. I was like, and you want to deal with him if he has a little bit of that, go right ahead, you know?
Hey, Laura, so someone asked me, and again, I'm assuming a lot of people probably ask, but so here's a question. It says, can you describe what you do, Dr. Daigle? And it's kind of hard to describe all that at once, but I'll just kind of get it in a nutshell. So the first thing that can you what?
Do they have all day to listen?
No, but it's just running the proper labs. Like, again, you know, I look at a lot of stuff, and one is doing a food sensitivity panel, know which foods you can and can't eat. The next thing is we have a great health coach who's helping us out with our patients' nutrition, their diet plans. And then we have, you know, then I do what's called the Melillo method. So I do this really cool evaluation. It's a full neurological evaluation. So I check for everything from developmental delays, primitive reflexes, check people's core, their balance, their sensory function, motor, vision, posture. And then again, I do all the protocols from Dr. Melillo. And then my software program I use called NeuroSage, which it's a computer program. We use eye movements and music therapy. And then I use this cool thing right here, Shed Light.
That's my favorite thing in the world.
it's incredible.
Anything. I mean, we have NeuroSage too, and we were using that. That was one thing we got right off the bat, and I was able to use that with NeuroSage. It was like that was. Remember our first phone call, and you were talking to me, and I was like, I need something because John will not participate in anything. I need something that he can just watch, and it can rehab him. And you're like, well, I got that, and I was like, no, you do not. But we got the NeuroSage, and I would play that. He didn't have to do anything, and he was just tracking it with his eyes, and it started, working, which is amazing. So for those out there that are like, well, they don't have function, or they can't interact, or they can't, these tools are passive. Like the laser, I was able to laser him, but I didn't have to ask anything out of him.
Yeah. This thing's incredible, people. So it's Shed Light Co lasers, and they're different. Shed Light actually they have like program settings with certain frequencies. So I definitely would recommend that. Another thing too, that we do is we just call it balance tracking. We do this balance tracking system. We try to find out which deficiencies people have. And then there's a program which you guys have. It's called Motion Guided, which is this headlight lamp that you have, and you have to like do all these head movements. And they're designed at 45-degree angles to try to help balance out the canals in the ear. We do a lot of core therapy, vibration therapy, music therapy, which you guys just got back from, but I love music therapy. I think it's incredible. And then, I'm a chiropractor. A lot of people, have asked, what do chiropractors do working with, people who have brain injuries or kids? And it's like, well, chiropractor, in my opinion, I think that chiropractic is definitely, people don't realize the impacts that it has. The spine the posture has a lot of sensory stimulation to the brain. And so we can do like instrument work on people's back. We can do manual work on people's back. And then I do virtual reality, which is really cool. And then sensory stimulation. And then Laura, one of the things people ask me too is, the main stuff is how did you do it? And, what kind of drove you? And also too, is there any type of thing? I know that, we're all kind of, definitely, strong Christians and love the heck out of God and Jesus, but could you just tell, how'd you do it? How'd you get to where you're at?
Whew. Well, what a journey, right? Love, that's number one. God is love, and love heals. So I think it really came a time that I had my breakdowns. Yes, I did, but it's like at those moments I remembered that I need to just pick myself back up and be John's voice. I had to advocate for John. He didn't have a voice, and I knew that John always said to me before, like, say we have a dog, we love our Kai, and I'm like, one day when she goes, he's like, one day we all kick the bucket and it's our time to go. John never feared death. So when in the situation that, he's hooked up to all this stuff, I whispered in his ear and I said, John, if it's too hard, I understand, don't hold on for me. And like, if God is trying to take you, like I had to surrender at that moment at the beginning, saying, okay, if you're supposed to stay here, then fight. But if it's too much, don't, like I handed it over to God. And I think I got so much peace from that, because I know John, if it was too much, then he would have not stayed. Right. But I really, the biggest thing for me is surrendering and letting go of control of everything and understanding. Hey guys, I think we just lost you. Let me get him. John's like, what's up? John, we lost him for a second. I think we hit an hour. Let me get Dr. Daigle back. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing, you guys. Hey! John, say hi, everybody. Nice sweetheart.
Good. We hit an hour.
Sorry about that, guys. I think we hit an hour, and I just shared it to my story, so I think I can save it from there. I'm still learning, you guys, because this is my first time doing live stuff. But yeah, you were just asking me, like, how did I do it? And I, like I said, I just surrendered from the beginning, and I just handed over to God and trusted that he would guide the path. and just realizing that my time on earth is not about me, right? I'm here for a purpose, to share the word of God and to give a bigger, for God to speak through me. And it was one thing that I want people to know is before the accident happened, I had been praying for years, God, use me as a vessel, use me for a bigger purpose, use me, speak through me. This isn't how I thought my prayer was going to be answered, but this is how God decided for it to go. And there was two things that John always asked before the accident. Being an Navy SEAL, I couldn't share about him on Instagram because, he was deployed and stuff. But so he was always like, oh, I wish we could talk more about you and, the two of us. And the second thing is he always said, share more about your faith. And so John challenged me with those two things. And so when this accident happened, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do these two things for John, and because a lot of people ask, like, how do you share this? And why are you doing this? I think John is the type of person, if he could help one person, it's all worth it. Yeah. So, I think that there's a bigger purpose to all of this. Just like, us going through 2 years of agitation. Do I want anybody to go through that? No, absolutely not. And that's why I want to provide it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and Laura, and again, some people that probably catch the back end, would you want to let them know about the website that you've put together?
Sorry, you guys, my dog is going crazy. She's our doorbell. About the website. Yeah, so Kyle helped me. We kind of gathered all these different links and different resources and different tools. We're still adding to it. I just got it up. We decided to do it on Sunday. I got it up for today. But we've just made links to everything that we've used for John, different therapies, different doctors, also environmental things that you don't even think about, just like different supplies for the house. And I just want to make it known that none of that, like, I'm not affiliated with anything. All of those are just me sharing what's worked for us. And I'll continue to change it periodically, check back. But I just want you guys to have all the resources, because a lot of people reach out and they want, some guidance, which I wish I, had this knowledge when I was going through this. But those resources will always be there for you when you know that you don't have to do them all right at the beginning. It's all a journey. Like, pick one thing at a time and it'll all fall into place. Like, just kind of listen to your gut and kind of your intuition, and you'll know what you need to do, because I think it's overwhelming at the beginning of a brain injury, because you're like, okay, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this. All these tools play out together. But I really wanted to, like I said, a lot of people reach out and I wish I could respond to everybody, but I want to give those resources to you. So go to the site. It's just staystrongjohnnygrant.com. And we're just providing, I have TBI resources is one of my links. And then I have environmental. So more like just products that I use on him, clean atmosphere, activities that I do with him. I actually put John's style in there. Isn't that funny? Because a lot of people like his sunglasses and his hats. Those two companies have been very, very kind to us. But anyway, so it's just, things that people ask that I just can't respond all to. I think these resources can get you going in the right direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. John, smile for us, man. I love you guys so much. John, you're an incredible person, and I'm just thankful that I got the opportunity to help you out.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome, man. I enjoyed every bit of it. So, Laura, I guess, the whole goal for all this stuff is for Laura and I, we just got together and said, hey, look, we want to really educate people, because, there's a big world out there and there's a lot of people suffering and hurting. And it's just a mission for us to just really try to just help, everyone out. And that's why we put together this resource, because, with brain injuries, you don't heal overnight. Sometimes people have, they get lucky and get divine intervention, which is amazing. But a lot of us have to suffer. And for me, from a clinical standpoint, it's very challenging whenever I get someone at first, because I have to tell them, look, this is a journey. This is something that, it's going to take repetition. It's going to take consistency. We're going to sometimes take 3 steps forward, maybe take 2 back. And it's all about fighting and not giving up. And again, you just want to always have a goal to look forward to. So and again, you started out to where if you're not walking, can you kick your leg out? Can you move your toes? It's trying to make realistic goals and then trying to obtain those goals to get to bigger goals. And when you see those big goals, we improve that. So, when Laura and I first met, again, when I work with patients, I want to know, like, what do you want to accomplish? And it's really cool.
List.
Yeah, it's really cool. Laura sent me this big list, and I look at this list and I'm like, all right, these are realistic goals. Like, we're going to be able to do this. And, from a confidence standpoint, I told Laura that I was like, yeah, we're going to get this stuff knocked out. We're going to do it. And, a couple months ago, I went back and looked at this list of all the things that John's accomplished. And it's really cool to see that, John's life has changed a lot. And your life, Laura, your family life, you guys are going to church now. You're going out to eat restaurants and,
we're
that's
out every single day. I mean, there was months that we never even left the house. Like, seriously, people, like, we were in our house. John was in his bed and we could not leave the house. Yeah. And I remember on that list, I said, like, my number one thing is I wanted quality of life for him. That was my number one. And then, it was, I wanted him to start participating. Well, he wasn't participating. I mean, like, we were not getting anywhere. Like, we were stuck. And those that are caregivers out there, like, I'm going to start giving some resources for that. But, this journey is tough because the one that is suffering, like the brain injury, typically they won't remember everything, right, when they're emerging and going through all these things. So you're almost the one suffering too. You're going through a journey of watching the one that you love, transform and come back to life. So my heart's out to you as well. And, I'll give some resources to help you and to just kind of keep yourself. But just remember that, and I think a lot of people say, like, I'm going to get burnt out and stuff like that. Honestly, you have to take care of yourself to be able to take care of the one you love, right? It's like my mom always tells me, like, when you're on the airplane, what do they say? Put your mask on before putting the mask on somebody else. Like, you have to remember to do that. And then another big tip I want to give is, like, when something, and I think I described this to you, Kyle, that, before meeting you, I felt like I was running around hectic, like trying to find answers. And it was almost like overwhelming for me, and it was putting my stress level up, that when you came along, it was like I finally got answers and that I could, like, release, and, like, I knew that somebody was there to help support me, right? So, if you're out there seeing a doctor that's saying, this is your diagnosis, or this is happening, or this is how it's going to be, and, like, all this negativity, there are people out there that have the answers, right? So don't lose hope. And like John would always say, a no is just a closer place to a yes, right? Anything is possible, just like your hat says. Consider nothing impossible. And then the other thing, what was I going at? I don't even remember. But no, what I was, Kyle, there's my left brain.
You're good. No, but the whole stuff though, Laura, we just really want to help people out. And again, it's just, if you're a caregiver out there, if you're a parent, you're, your spouse, just never give up. Always ask doctors why, and keep asking why. Always get answers, and stay educated, and just realize that, again, this thing says nothing's impossible. And for me, again, I say the same stuff. My goal was to make a world impact. And if someone, I told people this, that, I was going to try to help change the world, and I live in Louisiana, people laughed at me and said, there's no way. And now I'm getting a chance to travel all over the world and helping people and helping clinics. And that's what it's all about. So, again, brain injuries, going back to that is just, never accept no for an answer. There's always something possible, and just trying to find doctors. Now, people always ask, well, where can I find people like myself? Or there's lots of other people better than me. But functional neurology is a great thing. There's a website, which we have a thing called iAFNR. There's a search directory. You can type in your location where you're at. You can find doctors that have been trained just like myself. And then Dr. Robert Malillo we have a presentation or a seminar November 9th and 10th at Life University. And you can go to drrobertmalillo.com, which Laura has that on the site. And you can schedule up if you're a clinician, you want to learn more. And our whole goal is just to really educate people, because that's the only way that we can really, all come together and really make a big change. And that's what this is all about, is just trying to spread the word, let people know that there's other alternatives. Is this the right, if all, and there's nothing against, you know, patients doing other care, other types of therapy. This is just something that works for us, and we want to share all these improvements. So we want to thank everyone that joined. I know, you know, John, thank you, man. Thank you for everything, and it's just great, man. Thumbs up. And then again, so if people want to try to reach out to me, what we do in our clinic is I take a case on once a week, and it's called an intensive. And we only do once a week, just one case per week, just because we want to really focus in on you on top of our other patients. And then, you know, I'm also open to do phone consults to try to help, you know, steer people in the right direction. But again, Laura and I put together a great website. My clinic information is put up on there under the doctor section. And again, the whole goal is just to try to help you guys out with getting, you know, more exposure. And then one other thing too. So if you're a clinician out there, you're a therapist, you're a loved one, caregiver, we actually took John's case and we made a case study out of it. And so if you went to Brain Chat, which we have that link up there too, there's a traumatic brain injury section. And we walked over all the therapy regimens and all the labs and stuff that, you know, we did with John.
Yes. He's a special one.
Yes. Awesome.
He's a rock star.
He is a rock star.
They rock on. Yeah. Thank you, Kyle, so much for
Thank you guys.
We'll have to do it again. And you guys, thank you for tuning in. And we'll just keep going forward. And, you know, in the comments on my post, ask questions, and we'll try to kind of answer as we can go along. But, again, those links on the website, I think, are a great starting point for anyone.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Bye. Say bye. Bye.